listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. There's a deadly disease that's killing healthy Aussies and that many think they're protected against, only to learn the truth once it's too late.
He was convulsing on the floor. He wasn't conscious. Yeah, it was just absolutely horrifying. 8 o'clock the night before, he had a runny nose. 11:30 the next night, he's brain dead with absolutely nothing can be done for him.
That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's check the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Tuesday, the 22nd of July.
Hey Helen, and to you listening. This morning, Foreign Minister Penny Wong has joined 24 countries, including the UK, Japan, Canada and France, demanding an immediate end to the war on Gaza and for Israel to lift aid restrictions. They've condemned Israel for depriving Palestinians of human dignity and criticised their drip-feeding of aid. It comes as over 800 Palestinians have been killed and reportedly targeted whilst lining up for aid at Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites, which are backed by the United States and Israel.
The nations also described the proposals from the Israeli Defence Minister to move 600,000 Palestinians to a so-called humanitarian city in Rafah, an area that has been heavily damaged by Israeli bombs, as completely unacceptable. Since then, Israel has also launched fresh raids and a ground operation in central Gaza, targeting Deir el-Balah, the main hub for humanitarian efforts in the region, forcing the evacuation of around 50 to 80,000 Palestinians. The city is one of the last remaining areas of Gaza that has not suffered significant war damage and is packed with displaced Palestinians. Meanwhile, just hours after the joint statement was released, an Israel Foreign Ministry spokesperson posted on X saying that it was disconnected from reality and that it is better to avoid statements of this kind.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something, though, that the Australian public will have a different tune on. They have been calling on the Australian government to take a stronger stance, and this isn't the first time Penny Wong has condemned Israel and the war on Gaza, but the PM had previously been criticised, Helen, and in the past for not taking a hard enough approach. However, that has shifted recently, at least verbally. Only in recent days he did label what was happening in Gaza, particularly around the treatment and killing of people seeking aid, as completely indefensible. And he says he's spoken with the Israeli PM, telling him that Israel was losing support by its own actions. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he regrets Mark Latham ever being elected as a Labor leader. It comes as the independent New South Wales MP faces mounting pressure to resign following allegations of emotional and physical abuse, taking a sexual video in parliamentary office and even defecating on his ex-partner, Natalie May Matthews, before sex. Speaking with the ABC's 7:30, Anthony Albanese says while Latham's image, which sits alongside other former Labor leaders in Parliament House, won't be removed, a sign is going to be erected condemning his behaviour.
Caucus approved it. It's language that points out that Mark Latham was expelled from the Labor Party in 2017, never to be allowed to return because his views don't represent the values that the Labor Party holds.
The PM says he never wanted Mark Latham to be leader, a stance he made clear at the time, but he did hold the role, so his image shouldn't be removed.
Well, it's a historical fact. The way to deal with that is to point out the changes that have occurred. Mark Latham has views which I find repulsive across a range of areas. Mark Latham since, though, has gone further and further and further away from any values that represent mainstream Australia.
Mark Latham has admitted to taking photos of female colleagues while in Parliament and making disparaging remarks about them. But besides that, has denied breaking any laws or legislative orders. And he's rejected his partner's abuse allegations and says any intercourse between them was consensual. No charges have been laid.
The federal government has given $14 million to South Australia to assist with an unprecedented toxic algal bloom outbreak across the state that's led to thousands of dead marine life, including sharks and stingrays, to wash up on metropolitan beaches. The bloom has been ongoing since March but hasn't been declared a national disaster, with the Federal Environment Minister Murray Watt saying the federal cabinet agrees it's a serious environmental event.
This is an unprecedented event. It is an indication of the type of events that we are likely to face as a nation and as a world in the future due to climate change.
He says that the funding will likely go towards research and the cleanup of the fragile coastal ecosystem. But the Greens say the federal government's response to the crisis and the funding package would have come a lot quicker if the bloom was occurring in Sydney, with Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young joining us on the briefing to say just that.
If this was happening on Bondi Beach and beachgoers in Sydney were seeing dead stingrays and mini sharks washing up on their beaches there at Bondi, there'd be a national outcry.
If you want to listen to the rest of that chat with the Senator, we'll pop the link in the show notes. In the meantime, the South Australian Government will meet today to discuss more possible funding for the environmental event for both short and long-term solutions.
It looks as though attending a swanky sandstone uni may have little difference on your career opportunities or graduate pay packet after all, according to a new analysis of the country's institutions. A review of graduate salaries of employees with undergraduate courses from a variety of Australian unis reveals the pay difference in most to be as little as 1 to 10 grand, if at all. And in some areas, graduates from prestigious unis were actually paid less than their counterparts hailing from regional areas.
And one career that made little to no difference on where you attended was teaching, with graduates from 18 different universities all making between $69,000 and $75,000 in their first year of work, and that's according to the Sydney Morning Herald. And the biggest difference, though, stemmed from those who completed psychology degrees, with a Macquarie Uni graduate earning a median salary of $65,000 compared to a Uni of New England in Parramatta graduate who was on $85,000. Law was another career which saw a near $20,000 pay difference depending on which uni you graduated from, but the location didn't seem to be the driving factor, with both the highest and lowest based in Sydney.
Yeah, and that was because we saw a law graduate from La Trobe Uni was making a median salary of around $64,000 a year compared to a Charles Darwin Uni graduate on $83,000 a year, which is a pretty steep jump. However, that's the same pay packet as those who completed their studies from the regionally based CQ Uni in Central Queensland, and I love to see that. I don't think it should be about where you go that determines the level of education that you get or your future career prospects, Helen. Like, many people travel from regional and rural areas to kind of attend uni in the cities because they already don't have access to courses otherwise. So I think it's great to see the regional unis stacking up against the capital city counterparts.
Yeah, and look, this conversation to me just kind of screams the same feeling as if you went to a private school or a public school. It just depends on your education or the degree you're doing. You're still getting a high school certificate. For me, going to these fancy unis sometimes just feels like a networking thing, just like a private school. So I'm not surprised by some of the pay brackets and the differences, but also a degree is a degree. And if you needed any more reason to jump back on the bandwagon and join the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders fanfare, this is it. An Aussie has just made the world-famous squad and is set to take part in the third season of the show, which isn't out yet, but stay tuned.
Yes, that's right. So Faith Ward hails from Perth in Western Australia, and she's become the third Aussie and the first New Zealander to join the team. She must have co-passports or something going on there. And speaking on the Today Show from Texas, she's said it's a dream come true.
I'm honestly beyond excited. I still can't comprehend what's just happened, honestly. It's insane. It's bigger than I ever even dreamed of. So I seriously was just waiting for someone to go, Faith, wake up, you were dreaming, because it didn't feel real, honestly. All the hard work has finally paid off and it was the best feeling of my life, seriously.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, I have to admit, I have watched every season, every episode of this already, this show. It's pretty cool to see an Aussie in there, but they work so hard. Like, it is so impressive what they do. They are complete athletes in their own right. So I can understand her feeling of that she's put everything into this and finally getting her reward.
Yeah, since the Netflix series that kind of was a reboot of the old series has blown up, there's thousands of applications around the world for a position in this squad, and there's only about 36 positions in this squad, so it's so competitive. And I mean, the global attention it's getting has been so great for the cheerleaders, because since the start of this Netflix series, these cheerleaders have received a 400% pay rise,
Cha-ching.
which is so well deserved considering this is $1 billion team.
And a little asterisk on that one, I did check. So it basically they were just paid an absolute pittance. That
nothing.
Not a full-time wage whatsoever. So now they're kind of like just being paid a full-time wage. It's nothing.
Yeah, they
over
don't
the
have
top.
to be nurses on the side now. Yeah.
No, but they can actually just go and treat this like a regular career, which is awesome, and that's what they were asking for. So I think this is cool. Go Faith. We'll be watching keenly in the next season. I know I will be. Are you, Helen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm already there.
Well, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is My Deep Dive, looking into the deadly disease that's killing healthy Aussies. Have a listen to that up next. There's an infectious disease that's taking lives and causing serious disabilities in Australia, and that many believe they and their kids are already protected against. 3 years ago, Stacey Chater learnt her son Brayden had contracted meningococcal B, an illness she thought he'd been vaccinated for as part of his childhood immunisations, but that wasn't the case. And like many others, Stacey only found out when it was too late. Stacey, thank you so much for joining me on the briefing today. Can you start by telling me a bit about Brayden's story?
Yes, he was 23 years old back in 2022. Fit, healthy young man, was playing rugby league, going to the gym every day. He'd been away hunting the weekend before. He came home on Thursday night and just said felt like he was getting sick. He had a temperature and a headache. And at the time, COVID was, going crazy. And I said, we should do a COVID test. And he just sort of said, I can't be bothered. We'll do it in the morning. I said, okay, no worries. I woke him up around 6 a.m. We did a COVID test, which was negative. And I just went off to work like a normal day. He had come home with a workmate around 3 o'clock, and they were all going to the pub for their Christmas drinks for work. The next time I heard from him was around 8 p.m. that night, and I got a message just saying, I feel like crap, I'm going home. And I said, okay, no problem. I'm just out for dinner. I won't be long. I got home around 9:30, and when I walked in the house, his brother said, you better check on him. He sounds like he's angry, or we just thought, he's angry because he's sick, And I opened his bedroom door and he was convulsing on the floor. He wasn't conscious. I was screaming at him. He was just thrashing around like in slow motion. It was really scary. I immediately called the ambulance. And then halfway into the hospital, it's about a 15, 20-minute drive, they just put all their lights and sirens on and took off. So when we got to the hospital, we were put straight into a family room with a liaison officer, which scared me to death because we hadn't seen Braid. And we sat there for about an hour, and then a team of doctors came in and sat down and just said, we're really sorry, but Brayden is brain dead and there's nothing we can do. So we were in absolute shock. We're saying, well, what's happened? They had no idea. Yeah, it was just absolutely horrifying. 8 o'clock the night before, he had a runny nose. 11:30 the next night, he's brain dead with absolutely nothing can be done for him. So I think it was the next Wednesday that I got a phone call out of the blue to say that they found that he had meningococcal B. As soon as they told me that, I straight away said, but he's been vaccinated. And they said, no, he hasn't. You get the vaccination for A, C, W, and Y, but not B. So I was so shocked. I didn't even know there was a strain that you weren't vaccinated against. And of course, in hindsight, had I known, he would have had that vaccination, and he may still be here with us today.
And is that your concern, that there might be other parents like yourself out there who believe their child has been vaccinated fully against meningococcal, only to not realise that the vaccination doesn't cover all strains that they might have got?
Yes, 100%. I believe that it should be available to everyone, and people should have the choice. They should know about it. 90% of people that I've come across over the last couple of years don't know that it's a different vaccine. So that's quite scary. So unfortunately with Men B, once you get it, the symptoms are very common symptoms: runny nose, headache, fever, but it attacks so fast, 1 in 10 people will die if they get this.
And obviously you're wanting parents to know about this. What are you hoping will change?
I am fighting really hard to get the vaccine free for all babies and teens in New South Wales. South Australia has had it for a few years now. Queensland brought it in about a year ago. The Northern Territory have just brought it in. Tasmania are in talks now of bringing it in. And it's just crazy to me that, New South Wales, our government has no interest in doing this for our people. How is it fair that if you're lucky enough to be born in Queensland or South Australia, then you can be covered, but if you're born here, sorry.
Now, Stacey is just one of a growing group that's pushing to raise awareness about meningococcal B and aiming to make the vaccine free nationwide. And joining her calls is the Royal Australian College of GPs. Dr. Ramya Raman is the Vice President and the Chair in WA, which is one of the states that's yet to take that step. Dr. Raman, why is meningococcal B not treated the same as the other strains and included in the National Immunisation Program to begin with?
First and foremost, it's probably good for us to just speak a little bit about meningococcal B. So meningococcal B is an infection that's caused by a bacteria called Neisseria meningitis. Now in Australia, it's now the dominant strain, responsible for about 80 to 85% of invasive meningococcal disease, specifically in infants, young children and adolescents. So meningococcal ACWY has been on the National Immunisation Program since 2018, and that was because there was a large rise in the serogroups W and Y, which made a single conjugate vaccine, which then made it more cost-effective and logically quite simple as well. Now, meningococcal B, there is a vaccination under the name of Bexsero. Now, initially, I believe when the data was being reviewed and the modelling showed that there was a high cost per life year saved compared to other funded vaccines. The circumstances have certainly changed, and I think we also have to recognise the value of the meningococcal ACWY in preventing those conditions. So we're seeing a rise in meningococcal B currently.
And how do you actually get meningococcal?
Meningococcal tends to harmlessly live in our nose and throat, and it's there in about 10% of the population. But it spreads through close, prolonged contact, for example, coughing, sneezing, or sharing drinks. And most of the carriers tend to stay well, but in a small minority, this particular bacteria can cross the lining of the nose and the throat, and then it enters the bloodstream, which then ultimately can invade the brain and other organs.
There's been some states that have pushed ahead and managed to make this free for demographics outside of just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children under 2 or for people with certain medical conditions. Why are New South Wales and WA falling behind?
Perhaps we've seen less in terms of the number of patients being affected within those states, but certainly now that we're seeing more of the states coming on board with the meningococcal B funding, it's time that we take that on board. The RACGP is calling for the free meningococcal B vaccination, particularly for children under 2 years and under, as well as teens aged 15 to 19. The Australian Immunisation Handbook recommends this vaccination. It's safe and effective, and it's time that we think about it for reducing the cost for our patients. And many of the patients are saying that cost is a barrier for vaccinating their children. Generally, vaccinations are proven to be very beneficial for the population in preventing the severity of a condition, the disability that can occur from an infective disease, and also preventing deaths. So there's certainly benefits.
And I spoke to Stacey earlier, who was one parent who thought that her son was vaccinated against meningococcal only to find out that the B strain wasn't covered in those early life immunisations. Do you think, as well as, say, making this free, that there also needs to be an awareness campaign to make sure that people are informed about that?
Certainly, I think as a GP, and I'm a practicing GP here in Perth, I can tell you that when, I see patients for their immunisations, specifically children, my team and myself, we often talk to the parents about the vaccines that are funded on the NIP. Some are state funded and some are not funded. So we offer the array of information there. Certainly a public health campaign does make a huge difference because you can reach more people with that sort of information. But the key message here to patients is that if you have a question, speak to your doctor about it.
Certainly, and hopefully soon WA and New South Wales can follow suit with the rest of the country. Doctor, thank you very much for joining me on the briefing today.
Thanks for having me on, Tara.
That was RACGP Vice President and WA Chair Dr Ramya Raman speaking with me there about meningococcal B, and earlier Stacey Chater. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.